It's my absolute privilege to share the dais with Dr. Ajay Kumar, who's been not only a mentor and a guide for over 15 years, but also a close friend. So it's absolute pleasure to be here with him and with all of you. We are here today to delve into the issues of Atmanirbhar defense. And I think the reason why we start talking about Atmanirbhar is because at some point in time, we were absolutely not Atmanirbhar. When we got freedom in 1947, the famous saying was that not even a pin was being manufactured in India. It was all being manufactured by our colonial masters. And so I think it's right for us to also, therefore, take some lessons from our erstwhile colonial masters. Our erstwhile colonial masters realized that their shipping industry in doldrums because of the larger, superior ships coming from India. They realized that they will not be able to compete because the total life cycle cost of ships built in India was much lower. They were much tougher, they lasted for long, they would carry much more cargo, and therefore there was no reason for the British ship industry to even exist. So what did the shipwrights do? For about 5 to 7 years, they lobbied with the then King of Britain, and they said, "Sir, Your Excellency, if you do not save us now, and your Royal Navy needs repairs and needs more ships, you will not find us around, because we would have starved to death by that time, our families would have been gone, your industry would have been gone. You will have to then get ships from India, and you have to have Indians to support you. And if they decide not to support your Royal Navy, you are royally messed up in that sense." And so if you go into the archives of British Parliament, which is all available online, you can go search, find out. 1815, they passed a law that all Indian ships carrying cargo of less than 300 tons are banned. No questions asked, banned. And any other ship, even if it's under the British flag, will carry extra taxes because it's an Indian ship that is bringing the goods in. So that was the first Atmanirbhar step of Britain, right? And we must learn from that. They were not Atmanirbhar before that. They did not have access to technology. The most superior ships were being built here. They figured out a mechanism by which they owned the latest generation of ships. How did they do that? They made the superior technology not accessible. And why did they choose 300 tons? Because they did not have the ability to build ships above 300 tons. So they chose the 300 tons as the cutover, and any ship below 300 tons cannot be made in India. A year later, they came out with another debilitating legislation saying that no Indian ship can participate in the transatlantic route. And why was the transatlantic route so critical? Because the British ships were going to West Africa, picking up slaves, taking them to America, dumping the slaves, picking up gold, going to Britain, dumping the gold, which was then used to do trade in India. The reason gold was important was they had to buy stuff from India. And then they would go back to Africa, pick up slaves, and that was the most lucrative industry going on. It's equivalent to the dot-com boom of now, of today's world. That was the thing. Everybody who could get into business would get into the slave business in those days. And the Indian ships were best suited for that. And the British decided that their ships should get a part of that business, and therefore they banned Indian ships in that entire shipping opportunity that was there. Driven by the fear of the King of England that he needs Atmanirbhar technology for his Royal Navy. And so he listened to what the shipwrights said. Shipwrights is the shipbuilding industry in Britain. And that brings us three very clear learnings for us. First is that the military-industrial nexus is extremely important. Something that we all know, but I'm repeating what we all know coming from the learnings. And we all know, therefore, that the military is as strong as the industry is. But the sub-learning in this context is that the industry also becomes stronger if the military is strong. There would have been no shipbuilding industry in Britain if the military of Britain did not decide to support their navy and therefore support an Atmanirbhar navy. And so it goes both ways. You need to have a strong military for a strong industry for a strong military, But you also need a strong military for a strong industry. Industry cannot stand on its own without the military being there. And there's a third leg to this conversation, which is the regulatory interventions. There was a regulatory intervention by which the Parliament, the British Parliament, came out with the laws. There were regulatory interventions in India in the last 7 to 8 years, which ensured that the private sector could get a larger slice of the military opportunities that we have here. There was a regulatory intervention to make sure that we have an Atmanirbhar Indian defense industry. And therefore, it's not just the private sector, but also everybody else, from startups to former military personnel. We had the Vice Chief of the Indian Air Force going and setting up JSR Dynamics, one of the most cutting-edge missile platforms, competing with the Delaleyas and the other Israeli platforms. We had young kids coming out and creating defense solutions. We had established defense conglomerates, the Tatas, Baba Kalyani, Mahindras, everybody pitching in, facilitated by the regulatory changes that came in. And that's an important component of that. And that was the first part of the learning that came out from this whole Atmanirbhar shipping initiative of Britain. The second key learning is that technology is not what you write in the books. Once the shipbuilders in Surat and Bengal were stopped from exporting their ships to Britain and therefore to everywhere else because they controlled the trade, the know-how existed. The know-how to build ships existed. But that did not mean they had the technology. Technology is driven by market access. You cut out market access, you cut out technology. And therefore, you can't even build the next generation of technologies. And I'll come to that as a third learning. So the key issue was that India continued to be a market to others, and therefore sustaining technologies, capabilities, and companies in the Western Hemisphere who would continuously give you an upgraded technology every single year, which, and I would defer to the former Defense Secretary, which was upgraded but still degraded in context of the state of the art. Because nobody would send you the latest state-of-the-art technology, unlike in the commercial world where the export technology is the cutting edge, in military will be degraded. Obviously, you don't want somebody else to have a better piece of equipment than what you yourself have. And that's the challenge that you have when we are talking about military technologies. The military technology needs to be supported by a market access. We were one of the largest market. We continue to be the largest market, but we were not a market to Indian players. We were a large defense market open to other players. And unless we have the market available to Indian players, we will not have the technology. And that brings us to the third learning. Why is technology important? When the shipping industry moved from wooden ships to steel ships, were Indian players involved? Were the players in Surat and Bengal involved? No, obviously not, because they were completely out of the picture. Unless you have the current generation of technology, you cannot have the next generation of technology. And as we all know, as we breathe on a daily basis, the technology is changing at an even faster pace every day. We have swarm-based drones coming in. Unfortunately, because of the display that we saw during Republic Day, we are pretty assured that India has the technologies, the swarm-based technology. But if the swarms have to be launched from an aircraft, do we have the ability to modify those aircrafts and put those swarms in, or do we have to get those type certifications from somewhere else, which will take 5 years or 7 years or whatever sweet time they decide to provide those type certifications? We have the triad of nuclear defense. We have land-based, air-based, submarine-based. But if tomorrow, if there is weaponization of space and we need to have a loitering munition up there in space, which can be brought down as and when we want and as and where we want, it may be not accepted in a national manner, but if that's something we want, then clearly we need access to space technology, we need access to launch technology. Unfortunately, India has that, right? And therefore, the point is, if you do not have access to the current technology, you'll always be behind in terms of the cutting edge technology and the bleeding edge technology. Now, it sounds a little funny that I'm using the words cutting edge and bleeding edge in the military context, but I'm talking about it from a purely rhetorical perspective, that they should be the latest technologies, without which we will not be able to create the next generation of technologies. If we want to mix cyber with space, with a hypersonic missile, which will then sniff out where it needs to reach, we need to have control over all of those technologies to be able to create the next platform of technologies. And therefore, it is critical that we have policies and we have the industrial capability to be able to reach the state of the art as of now, and therefore build the next generation of technologies which India needs and Indian terrain needs. Having said that, I think we should all celebrate today as we stand here or sit here, as the case may be, because we have in the last 8 years become a major exporter of defense solutions. As FY22 ended, there was 13,000 crores of exports that happened, up by 8 times since 2014. And clearly, as the current government seems to have been absolutely instrumental in making this change. It's a change of mind, it's a change of policy, it's a change of pushing the industry and giving them the faith that there is a market, the Indian market, that is accessible to them. Till now, the Indian market was not accessible to them. We continued to be colonies for some other markets, some other companies, some other jurisdiction. That has changed. And as I mentioned, a lot of the change was actually brought in under the oversight of Dr. Ajay Kumar. So I'm really honored to be sharing the dais along with Dr. Ajay Kumar, under whose oversight a lot of these changes were brought in. And I look forward to the discussions we're going to have today on Atmanirbhar defense. It is a burning topic. We have covered a lot of ground, but as the saying goes, there is a lot more to be covered. We are still not at the cutting edge. We are still not proportionate to the heft of India, a $4 trillion economy that we will be very soon, having 16% of the humanity, being a leader in many sectors, food, transportation, vegetables, you name it, we have been leaders in it, technology, digital, we are leaders in it. But our defense sector is still not comparable to the heft that India carries. And I'm pretty confident that as we continue in the existing trajectory with the Modi government putting the push on having an Atmanirbhar defense sector in India, we'll soon not just be at par with others, but we will be beating them. And I therefore look forward to the conversations and the discussions that will happen today in this conclave. So thank you so much, and thanks for the patient hearing. I look forward to learning from all of you. Thank you.